Kalen Voss stepped into the silent vacuum of the neutral zone, holding the small, blue-skinned girl against his chest as two warring fleets held their breath. 100 sniper glints danced across his visor like dying stars. If he tripped, the galaxy burned. If he stopped, she died. He just kept walking. Do you have the nerve to stand between two sun-crushing armadas with nothing but a child in your arms? Subscribe to witness the moments where one person changes the map of the stars. Let's look at how a medic ended up in the crosshairs of history. The coffee in his thermos had still been warm then. 6 hours before the orbital bombardment turned Outpost Zenith into a graveyard of jagged glass and ionized dust. Voss didn't look like a man about to start a revolution. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since the hegemony first traded fire with the Valari 3 months ago. He moved through the ruins of the outpost with a sensor sweep in one hand and a heavy kinetic pistol in the other, though the latter remained holstered. To Voss, the pistol was dead weight. The medkit was the only thing that mattered. The air smelled of scorched silicon and the metallic tang of cooling slag. Commander Vance's voice crackled through the comms, jagged and impatient. Voss, we've got Valari signatures dropping out of warp. Extraction is 5 minutes out. If you aren't at the LZ, we're leaving your shadow behind. Copy, Commander, Voss replied, his voice a low rasp. Just finishing a sweep of Sector 4. He was lying. He wasn't sweeping. He was following a rhythmic, fluttering pulse on his bioscanner that shouldn't have been there. It was too weak for a hegemony soldier and too melodic for the local wildlife. He kicked aside a piece of reinforced plating, his boots crunching on the remains of a data terminal. That was when he saw it, the faint, rhythmic glow of a shard of ethyl. It was a jagged crystal pendant, pulsing with a soft cyan light that seemed to mirror a heartbeat. It was clutched in a small, four-fingered hand poking out from beneath a collapsed structural beam. Voss dropped to his knees. He didn't call for backup. He didn't signal the squad. He began to dig. Wait, Voss, Vance barked as the biolink picked up his elevated heart rate. What are you doing? I told you to move. I found a survivor, Voss said, his fingers catching on sharp rebar. The shard of ethyl flared brighter as he cleared the first layer of debris. Beneath the dust and the gray insulation foam lay a child. She couldn't have been more than 7 cycles old. Her skin was the deep, bruised violet of a Valari noble, and her golden eyes were wide with a terror so profound it seemed to vibrate the air between them. The law says she is the enemy. My medkit says she's a child bleeding out, Voss muttered, more to himself than to the commander. Voss, leave it. Vance's voice was a roar now. That's a Valari asset. If the reinforcements find us with one of theirs, they won't just fire. They'll glass the entire province. Get to the LZ now. Voss didn't answer. He reached for his helmet seals. Voss, don't you dare. The hiss of depressurization cut the commander off. Voss pulled his helmet off, exposing his face to the thin, acrid air of Zenith. He needed her to see him, not the cold, reflective visor of a hegemony killer, but a face, eyes, exhaustion. He reached out, his bare hand trembling slightly. The girl pulled back, the shard of ethyl in her grip pulsing a frantic, jagged red. She was dying. A piece of shrapnel had opened a jagged line across her thigh, and the blue-black ichor of her blood was soaking into the dust. It's okay, he whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand the words. I've got you. Does a soldier's oath to protect life stop at the edge of his own species? Or is that where the real test begins? Subscribe to find out if Voss can carry this burden through the fire. We're just getting to the part where the cost gets calculated. He worked with a frantic surgical precision. He ignored the proximity alarms screaming in his ear. He ignored the distant thunder of Valari dropships entering the atmosphere. He focused only on the wound, the shard, and the small, cold hand that eventually stopped fighting and gripped his forearm with the strength of the drowning. Voss hauled her out of the hole just as the sky began to scream. He didn't head for the shelter. He headed for the transport, the girl wrapped in his tactical jacket, the shard of ethyl glowing like a steady, defiant candle against his chest. Vance was waiting at the ramp of the ethyl guard, his face a mask of fury. He looked at the bundle in Voss's arms, then at the sky where the first Valari interceptors were breaking the cloud layer. "You just signed our death warrants," Vance said, his hand hovering over his sidearm. "Then let's make sure the ink stays wet," Voss replied, pushing past him into the hold. The Ethelgard groaned under the stress of a blind jump, the interior lights flickering to a sickly emergency red. In the medbay, the air was thick with the smell of ozone and the coppers of Valari blood. Voss didn't look up when Jackson Reed, the ship's lead tech, slammed the door shut behind him. Reed's eyes weren't on the medic. They were locked on the glowing shard of Ethel resting against the girl's sternum. "That's not just a trinket, Voss," Reed whispered, his voice cracking. "My scanners are redlining. That pulse, it's a high-frequency carrier wave. She's the missing high scion. The Valari aren't attacking because of the war. They're attacking because they think we kidnapped their heart." Voss paused, his blood-stained hands hovering over Myra's bandage. He looked at the girl. Her breathing was shallow, her small fingers still curled into the fabric of his sleeve. He saw a child. The rest of the galaxy saw a reason to kill. Reed moved to a console, his fingers flying. "It gets worse. I found a subdermal spike in her spinal column. This hegemony tech, Kalen. A tracker. But it's shielded from her own people. Someone in our high command wanted her found by us, just so the Valari would never stop swinging. A princess lost in the rubble, a soldier found in his defiance. It was all a setup for an eternal war." Voss felt a coldness settle in his gut that no thermal suit could block. He stood up, crossing to the communications array. He didn't ask for Vance's permission. He didn't check the protocols. He patched into the wide-spectrum emergency frequency, the one every ship in the sector monitored, friend or foe. "This is Specialist Medic Kalen Voss of the Hegemony," he said, his voice echoing through the ship. "I have the High Scion. She is alive. She is hurt. And she is coming home." One unauthorized transmission started a peace that 10,000 shells couldn't forge. The silence that followed was more deafening than the orbital strikes. For 3 hours, the Ethelgard drifted in the neutral zone, caught between two armadas that could have vaporized it in a heartbeat. Voss spent that time sitting on the floor of the medbay, letting Mira grip his thumb while he told her stories about rain on Earth, a concept she seemed to find as magical as her shard. And then it was time. Voss stepped into the silent vacuum of the neutral zone, holding the small, blue-skinned girl against his chest as two warring fleets held their breath. The magnetic boots of his suit clanked rhythmically against the docking umbilical, the only sound in a universe that had suddenly forgotten how to scream. He could see the snipers now, perched in the jagged observation ports of the Valari flagship, their long-barreled rifles tracked directly onto his center mass. He didn't look at the guns. He looked at the woman waiting at the far end of the gantry. Matriarch Solari stood without armor, her robes fluttering in the artificial venting of the airlock. Voss reached the threshold. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the steady, calm pulse of the shard of Ethel. He didn't drop to a knee. He didn't offer a salute. He simply leaned forward and placed the sleeping girl into the matriarch's outstretched arms. The shard flared a brilliant, blinding gold as it touched Solari's skin, the light washing over Voss's tired face. The matriarch looked down at her daughter, then up at the human who had crossed a species-wide divide with a sleeping girl in his arms. She didn't say a word, but she dipped her head, a gesture of respect that silenced every weapon in the system. Months later, the gardens of the Valari homeworld smelled of night-blooming jasmine and damp earth. Voss walked the stone paths, no longer wearing the charcoal gray of a hegemony medic, but the simple linen of a guest. He didn't carry a medkit anymore. Beside him, Mira sprinted ahead, her laughter a bright, melodic sound that echoed off the ancient marble walls. She stopped by a fountain and looked back, holding up the shard of Ethel. It no longer pulsed with the frantic red of a dying pulse. It glowed with a steady, tranquil blue, casting a long light across the path to guide him through the shadows. Voss watched the light dance on the water, a quiet reminder that sometimes, the most radical act of war is refusing to fight it. He sat on a bench and watched the sun set, the shard's light the last thing he saw before the stars came out. The war began with a map, but it ended with a heartbeat. Do you believe a single act of mercy can outweigh a century of hate? Subscribe to see what happens when the next soldier chooses to look closer. Tomorrow we'll see if the peace can hold.